Hey guys, I'm gonna go ahead and read my reading for Wednesday, which is 266 to, let me move my camera here, 271. So I know there's been like a lot of confusion about, what are we supposed to be doing? How much of this work is going to be counted? Um, I'm going to continue to read to you. I want you to answer the discussion board questions because I think it's going to help you. I don't know how long this is going to last. This is something we've never had to deal with before. So I think that it's only acceptable for me to read to you, for me to be there for you as an educator. Um, I'm not going to pretend that this is going to be easy. I miss you guys a lot. But I think it is my job to continue the curriculum just as we've been doing it. So I want you to continue to answer discussion board questions and follow along with the reading. I mean, listen, we have dedicated so much time to this book. This book is amazing, and I don't think it's fair not to finish it. So this is it for you guys. You've just got just some less than 2 months left, and I miss you. Um, a lot. So I just want to stay as connected as we can. So I'm going to be at 266. I'm going to read to 271. Um, the end here is kind of crazy and kind of emotional. So, Mrs. Cooper's going to cry the whole time, but it's going to be okay. So we are at the Glass Castle. A month later, I got a call from Mom. She was so excited she was tripping over her own words. She and Dad had found a place to live. Their new home, Mom said, was an abandoned building on the Lower East Side. It's a tad run down, she admitted, but all it really needs is a little TLC. And best of all, it's free. Other folks were also moving into the abandoned buildings, she said. They were called squatters, and the buildings were called squats. Your father and I are pioneers, Mom said, just like my great great grandfather who helped tame the Wild West. Mom called in a few weeks and said that although the squat still needed a few finishing touches, a front door, for example, she and Dad were officially accepting visitors. I took the subway to Astor Place on the last spring day and headed east. Mom and Dad's apartment was in the 6-story walk up. The mortar was crumbling and the bricks had come loose. All the windows on the first floor had been boarded up. I reached to open the building's front door, but where the lock and handle could have been, there was only a hole. Inside, a single naked light bulb hung from a wire in the hallway. On one wall, chunks of plaster had crumbled away, revealing the wooden ribs and pipes and wiring. On the third floor, I knocked on the door to Mom and Dad's apartment, and I heard Dad's muffled voice. Instead of a door swinging inward, fingers appeared on both sides. It was lifted off of the frame altogether. There was Dad, beaming and hugging me while he went on about how he'd yet to install a door hinge. As a matter of fact, they'd only just gotten the door itself, which he found in the basement of another abandoned building. I like how the mom says that she's a bit of a pioneer. If you guys remember when we watched, there was an interview with Jeanette, and it showed like vintage video of Rex and Rosemary in like a building. This is the building that they're talking about. They did like a expose on squatters back in like the 90s and 80s, and that was the time that we're reading now when, Rosemary was going through all her paintings and Rex was kind of walking around. It was really interesting. Mom came running up behind him, grinning so widely you could see her molars, and she gave me a big hug. Dag knocked a cat off the chair. They had already taken in a few strays and offered me a seat. The room was crammed with broken furniture, bundles of clothes, stacks of books, and Mom's art supplies. 4 or 5 electric space heaters blasted away. Mom explained that Dad had hooked up every squat in the building to an insulated cable he had hot wired off a utility pole down the block. We're all getting free juice thanks to your father, Mom said. No one in the building could survive without him. Dad chuckled modestly. He told me how complicated the process had been because the wiring in the building was so ancient. "Damnedest electrical system I'd ever seen," he said. "The manual must have been written in hieroglyphics." I looked around and it hit me that if you replaced the electric heater with the coal stove, this squat on the Lower East Side looked pretty much like the house on Little Hobart Street. I had escaped from Welch once, and now, breathing in those same old smells of turpentine and dog hair and dirty clothes, of stale beer and cigarette smoke and unrefrigerated food slowly going bad, I had to urge to bolt. But Mom and Dad were clearly proud, and as I listened to them talk, interrupting each other in their excitement to correct points of facts, filling gaps of the story, about their fellow squatters and the friends they had made in the neighborhood and the common fight against the city housing agency, it became clear they'd stumbled on an entire community of people like themselves. People who lived unruly lives battling authority and who liked it that way. All of those years of roaming, they'd found home. Do you guys know anybody like that? People who, just kind of, I don't know, they hate authority. They march to the beat of their own drummer. And when asked to do something, they ask why. They don't respond yes. I'm a yes responder, right? Like if somebody tells me to do something, I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And I have a lot of intrigue. I wouldn't say respect. I mean, I think there are some people that need to listen to authority a little more, but I have intrigue for people that ask why. I think that's really interesting. So, very interesting thought. I graduated from Bernard that spring. Brian came to the ceremony, but Lori and Maureen had to work, and Mom said it was just a lot of boring speeches about a long, winding road of life. Excuse me, I wanted Dad to come, but chances were he'd show up drunk and try to debate the commencement speaker. "I can't risk it, Dad," I told him. "Hell," he said. "I don't have to see my mountain goat grabbing a sheepskin to know she's got a college degree." The magazine where I'd been working 2 days a week had offered me a full-time job. What I needed was a place to live. For several years, I had been dating a man named Eric, a friend of one of Lori's eccentric genius friends who came from a wealthy family, ran a small company, and lived alone in an apartment on Park Avenue in which he'd been raised. He was a detached, almost fanatically organized man who maintained detailed time management logs and could recite endless baseball statistics. But he was decent and responsible, never gambled or lost his temper, and always paid his bills on time. When he heard that I was looking for a roommate to share the apartment, he suggested that I move in with him. I couldn't afford half the rent, I told him, and I wouldn't live there unless I could pay my own way. He suggested I begin by paying what I could afford, and as my salary went up, I could increase the payment. He made it sound like a business proposition, but a solid one, and after thinking it over, I agreed. When I told Dad about my plans, he asked if Eric made me happy and treated me well. "Because if he doesn't," Dad said, "I will by God kick his butt so hard his asshole will be up between his shoulder blades." "He treats me fine, Dad," I said. What I wanted to say was that I knew Eric would never try to steal my paycheck or throw me out a window, that I'd always been terrified I'd fall for a hard-drinking, hell-raising, charismatic scoundrel like you, Dad, but I'd wound up with a man who is exactly the opposite. All my belongings fit into 2 plastic milk crates and a garbage bag. I hauled them to the street, hailed a taxi, and took them across town to Eric's building. The doorman in a blue uniform with gold piping hurried out from under the awning and insisted on carrying the milk crates into the lobby. Eric's apartment had cross-beam ceilings and a fireplace with an Art Deco mantel. I actually lived on Park Avenue, I kept telling myself as I hung my clothes in the closet Eric had cleared out for me. Then I started thinking about Mom and Dad. When they had moved into their squad, a 15-minute subway ride south and about a half a dozen worlds away, it seemed as if they had finally found the place where they belonged, and I wondered if I had done the same. I invited Mom and Dad up to the apartment. Dad said he'd feel out of place and never did come, but Mom visited almost immediately. You know her, she needed to look around. She turned over dishes to read the manufacturer's name and lifted the corner of the Persian rug to count the knots. She held the china to the light and she ran her fingers along the antique campaign chest. And then she went to the window and she looked out at the brick and limestone apartment buildings across the street. I don't really like Park Avenue, she said. The architecture is too monotonous. I prefer the architecture in the Central Park West. I told Mom she was the snootiest squatter I'd ever met, and that made her laugh. When we sat down on the living room couch, I had something I wanted to discuss with her. I now had a good job, I said, and was in a position to help her and Dad. I wanted to buy them something that would improve their lives. It could be a small car, it could be a security deposit or a few months' rent on an apartment. It could be a down payment on a house in an inexpensive neighborhood. We don't need anything, Mom said. We're fine. She put down her teacup. It's you I'm worried about. You're worried about me? Yes, very worried. Mom, I said, I'm doing really well. I'm very, very comfortable. That's what I'm worried about, Mom said. Look at the way you live. You've sold out. Next thing I know, you'll become a Republican. She shook her head. Where are the values I raised you with? Mom became even more concerned about my values when my editor offered me a job writing a weekly column about what he called the behind-the-scenes doings of the movers and shakers. Mom thought I should be writing exposés about oppressive landlords, social injustice, and the class struggle on the Upper East Side. But I leaped at the job because it meant I would become one of those people who knew what was really going on. Also, most people in Welch had a pretty good idea of how bad off the Walls family was, but the truth was they all had their own problems. They were just better than we were at covering them up. I wanted to let the world know that no one had a perfect life, that even the people who seemed to have it all together had their secrets. Dad thought it was great that I was writing a weekly column about, as he put it, the skinny dames and fat cats. He became one of my most faithful readers and would go to libraries to research the people in the column, then write me tips. This Astor broad's got one hell of a past, he told me one time. Maybe you should do a little digging in that direction. Eventually, even Mom acknowledged that I had done all right. No one expected you to amount to much, she told me. Lori was the smart one, Maureen is the pretty one, Brian is the brave one. You never had much going for you except that you were always a hard worker. I loved my new job, even more than I loved my Park Avenue address. I was invited to dozens of parties a week, art gallery openings, benefit balls, movie premieres, book parties, and private dinners in marble-floored dining rooms. I met real estate developers, agents, heirists, fund managers, lawyers, clothing designers, professional basketball players, photographers, movie producers, and television correspondents. I met people who owned entire collections of houses and spent more on one restaurant meal than my family had paid for 93 Little Hobart Street. True or not, I was convinced that if all these people found out about my mom and my dad and who I really was, it would be impossible for me to keep my job. So I avoided discussing my parents. When that was impossible, I lied. A year after I started the column, I was in a small, overstuffed restaurant across the table from an aging, elegant woman in a silk turban who oversaw the international best-dressed list. So, where are you from, Jeanette? West Virginia. Where? Welch? How lovely. What's the main industry in Welch? Coal mining. As she questioned me, she studied what I wore, assessing the fabric and appraising the cost of each item and making a judgment about my taste in general. And does your family own coal mines? No. What do your parents do? My mom's an artist. And your father? He's an entrepreneur. Doing what? I took a breath. He's developing a technology to burn low-grade bituminous coal more efficiently. And they're still in West Virginia? She asked. I decided I might as well go all in. They love it there, I said. They have a great old house on a hill overlooking a beautiful river. They spent years restoring it. Mm. I mean, we all know that she ends up telling the truth in the end, and it kind of like that idea of that shame that we watched that interview with Oprah Winfrey, that you release the shame and you're free. So she does end up releasing that shame of her parents and really struggling with this idea of, will she be found out? Will she be accepted? And if she's not accepted, how does that look for her life? Um, we can also tell right away that this Eric relationship is probably not going to last. It sounds like more like a business deal than a love. Um, and what's interesting is Rosemary had a very dysfunctional marriage, right? But she and Rex loved each other a tremendous amount. And Rosemary could tell already that Jeanette was not really in love, or what we see as a real love relationship. Um, so that's that part of the reading. We're getting closer and closer to obviously the death of Rex, which you guys knew was coming, as well as this huge, um, shocking discovery about the land in Texas, which you guys have been really fighting over how much that land is probably worth. Well, you're going to find out. Um, I miss you. I look forward to seeing you soon. With this video, there will be a discussion board that you will answer as well. And if you have any questions, please email me, tcooper@mths.us. You guys have a great evening.